At 2:30 a.m., about a year ago, on a dark and deserted portion of Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu, California, a Los Angeles County Sheriff's officer on a routine patrol rolls up on a minivan that's parked in the bike lane. And as he gets closer, he can make me out crouched down behind the minivan, tending to an open flame on a camp stove. Naturally, he pulls up right next to me and rolls down his window, and we stare at each other in silence for 10-15 seconds until the smell of Campbell's chicken soup boiling on the camp stove sort of wafts into his window. And he looks up, rolls up his window, and drives off. Not a few minutes later, coming up the road out of the darkness, I hear the footsteps of Mike Trevino. I yell into the darkness, "Hey, Mike, good to see you. Have a seat. I made you some chicken soup." Mike sits down, and I say, "You'll never believe what happened to me. A cop just rolled up on me, and I had no idea how I was going to explain to him what I was doing on the side of the road at 2:30 in the morning in Malibu. Because the truth was, I was just one man on the side of the road making some chicken soup for another man."
My perspective was I was all alone, very solitary, running, had just run over 100 miles, and I see Roger pacing back and forth. I hadn't seen the cop. So he's pacing back and forth. Is everything all right? It's like for the first night. Like, you can't be hallucinating yet. And you've seen it happen. And he said, "Yeah, everything's fine." And I'm like, "What's wrong?" He's like, Mike, I'm proud to be a man making another man chicken noodle soup." And all I could say was, "Roger, I'm really proud to be that other man." So I sat down and I ate the chicken noodle soup and actually felt obligated to finish it. And then got up and continued running almost 300 miles to raise money for the Navy SEAL Foundation and to benefit the Monarch School in San Diego. It was a wonderful experience, and I have to tell you that doing that last year really forced me to understand why something like that would give me meaning and feel like I had a sense of purpose. And I really reduced it to three things. One is that I have to do something epic. I have to challenge myself, and I like to do big stuff. And I noticed, for me, it was a big run. For others, it may be a 5K. That's great. It's all relative. Like, for example, Joe has a sign out here. I just noticed it today. It says New York is 278 miles away. Boston's 153. And I was thinking, could I actually run back to Boston before I have meetings tomorrow night? And that's just the way my head works. Anyway. So doing big stuff, doing the stuff with people that care for you, that you care for, and frankly, people that share the same value system. And then lastly is to benefit a cause, right? To do something that I actually feel like I'm inspiring a cause, raising money for a cause, and those three things for me ultimately give me meaning and frankly a sense of impact on the greater good, if you will. In a way, I sort of needed an excuse, if you will, to go do some crazy run or ride. And now I realize it was actually, it makes the whole experience better. So if you think about the philanthropic component of that, and frankly, how do you mix these up? How hard is it? And I very quickly realized, just for this, we had to wire up a WordPress site, a transaction platform, and essentially wire up I think we use CrowdRise, but a nonprofit transactional system. It was crazy, and I'm a tech guy. It was wiring up all these different things, running the social campaigns, et cetera. And I didn't, if ultimately it was one of those things where I ended up spending dozens of hours. Like, man, this is too hard. It's hard for the charities, it's hard for the participants, and it's really hard doing these sort of one-off, fragmented, ad hoc things. And so I said, look, we can do this better. And we need to really think through how we do that, because there's a lot of players in this ecosystem, but they're really not well integrated. What's it going to take to get them integrated? Let me get a show of hands. How many people here can actually show how much money or account for how much money you've raised or inspired people to go raise over the course of your careers? It's great. And can you keep track of the miles that you've run to train for something and gotten credit for that and prove it? Have you Do you have a way to show how many hours you've actually donated for something like Habitat for Humanity? And so what we've seen is all these things are sort of episodic in nature, and there's no way to track over time the giving, the training, et cetera. And ultimately, are you able to inspire others and show others who have actually donated on your behalf, right? Sending out that email that says, hey, I'm going to do this 5K for this cause, and you're ultimately bringing your friends, your family, and peers in the workforce to come and do something, write a check ultimately, and they need to be part of that whole experience. And it's tough to actually quantify for people, and people like to have things quantified. Furthermore, we've also discovered that if you look at the economics, it's hard to demonstrate to the actual cause that you're running for or you're raising money for exactly how much they're getting. And if you think about, there's a lot of players in this ecosystem, the credit card transaction processors, the actual charity platforms. At the end of the day, about a dime of every dollar donated is just scraped right off the top to benefit those for-profit transactional processors. And a great example is Ed Norton, who is obviously Fight Club, right? Great actor, the primary inventor behind CrowdRise, which is great, but which actually he brought the state of the art along. But our opinion is that 5% is egregious. It shouldn't 5% to ultimately the people that can then at least afford to have that taken from them. The nonprofits have nothing. And our opinion is that there's a better way to do this. And it's a way where it can actually be, you can be part of a community, you can actually have all the stakeholders involved. And the way we see the stakeholders, it really comes down to four things. There's the actual event itself, there's the corporate employers of these people, there's the nonprofits, obviously, and then there's the participants. And ultimately, we believe that we can do it in a way where we're not taking anything off the top. And our perspective is that if you can align those four stakeholders in a way that positively reinforces the involvement of the other stakeholders, you can actually make this a self-sustaining platform that doesn't have to skim off the top. And the way we ultimately envision doing this is by allowing people to capture what they do, how they do it, so the number of miles they've run, the number of dollars they've given. The employers care because ultimately it's for health and wellness. And right now there's massive budgets in play. We heard earlier about the year-over-year growth and the cost of providing health care at 17%. I've heard everything from 12 to 30%. So there's already budgets in play at large employers, especially those that are at risk and self-insured, that actually spend a ton of money incentivizing their covered lives to run, to be more active. They have smoking cessation, they have Biggest Loser, they have all these programs. There's a lot of money that ultimately they would be happy to throw into this marketplace that allows us to have sort of a self-reinforcing positive benefit. That's just the employer. The events, of course, the events themselves would love to have more participants. And so we've, in our discussions with Spartan and some little local 5Ks, they'd love to have us bring employer populations to participate in their events. And then lastly, there's the view of the corporation from a social responsibility perspective. And that is, we've discovered that, and I didn't know this until recently, that companies that are seen as social responsible actually are more likely to acquire a new customer than those that aren't, right? So this can be good for business, and it needs to be good for business. It's the only way this thing works. So with all that said, if you align the stakeholders of this sort of problem, and you actually create a system whereby it's sort of self-reinforcing, it's a good thing, right? And so the thing that we ultimately envision being novel and creative about this is that if you create a social currency that allows us to quantify the giving, the fundraising, the hours donated, et cetera, you can actually do it in a way that inspires other people. You can inspire other people by you're essentially allowing them to see what you've done, when you did it, and it tracks you, right? It's this notion of lifelong giving, that it follows you over time. And so our perspective on using this social currency is you have to have a quantifiable metric to use to actually convert into something that's monetary. And in other words, a point system that allows you to get the points for, like I said earlier, the money raised, the miles run, and ultimately you can prove it into your employer, who's going to incentivize you. Maybe pay your registration to a Spartan race, where they say, wow, we just love to have you active. We gladly subsidize your cost for that event if you run this some number of miles over a certain month. It's great. So it's like an airline miles system that ultimately allows you to convert these points into a real dollar value. It's tough to do, but the systems exist to do it. And so the other sort of beneficiaries could be nonprofits, these races. Ultimately, it's a marketplace where you can go buy an activity monitor, you can race registration, even donate your points to a nonprofit that you believe in. So all of this is designed to sort of, again, create this notion of lifelong health and inspire people to do epic stuff, people to actually do stuff they care about, and to have them do it for a cause. And then ultimately, and if I were to say anything to my 15-year-old self, I was actually embarrassed when I was a kid. When I was 15 and I was going out on these crazy bike rides, I grew up in Iowa, it was actually sort of not the thing to do, but that's just who I was. And my opinion on this is if people are given something to actually, an ecosystem, a place where there's actually a forum to have this dialogue, to learn more about training, nutrition, et cetera, especially at the age of 15, it becomes one of those things where it's just a lifestyle.
So Mike had run 250 miles without sleeping. And it was noon on a very hot Southern California day, and he's running up a hill towards the back entrance of Camp Pendleton. And at the top of the hill, there's a lone Marine standing guard. Mike runs up to him, pulls out his driver's license and says, "Hi, can I run across the base?" The Marine looks at him like he was an alien. So I'm in the minivan. I try to help. I yell out the window. It's for the Navy SEAL Foundation. He's running down the coast to make money. So the Marine says, true story. So the Marine says, "Are you a Navy SEAL?" Mike says, "No, but I know some." So feeling like we weren't really making progress, I said, "We're filming a documentary, and it's about Mike Trevino, and he's this great runner. You can Google him." Google him, that sounded great. So I said, "Can we put you in the documentary? Do you mind if we take your picture?" And sure enough, we get out of the minivan and take a few snapshots and pantomime, taking some video with a GoPro, and the next thing we know, we're on the base. As soon as we get out of the earshot of the Marine, Mike looks over to me and says, "You know, we got to find a way to make this easier for people to do big things like this." And I said, "Yes, we do, Mike. Yes, we all do. Thank you."